question that get asked a lot is, how do we keep up to date with the latest AI news? Why do you need to keep up to date with the latest AI news? If you talk to the users, you understand what they want, what they don't want, look into the feedbacks, then you can actually improve the application way more.
A lot of companies are building AI products. A lot of companies are not having a good time building AI products.
We are in an idea crisis. Now we have all this really cool tools to help do everything from scratch. It can help you design, it can help you write code, it can help you build websites. So in theory, we should see a lot more. But at the same time, people are like somehow stuck. They don't know what to build.
All this AI hype, the data is actually showing most companies try it, doesn't do a lot, they stop. What do you think is the gap here?
It's really hard to measure productivity. So I do ask people to ask their managers, would you rather give everyone on the team very expensive coding agents subscriptions, or you get an extra headcount? Almost everyone, the managers, would say headcount. But if you ask VP level or someone who manages a lot of teams, they would say one AI assistant. Because as managers, you are still growing. So for you, having one extra headcount is big. Whereas for executive, maybe you have more business metrics that you care about. So you actually think about what actually drive productivity metrics for you.
Today, my guest is Chip Huyen. Unlike a lot of people who share insights into building great AI products and where things are heading, Chip has built multiple successful AI products, platforms, tools. Chip was a core developer on Nvidia's Nemo platform, an AI researcher at Netflix. She taught machine learning at Stanford. She's also a two-time founder and the author of two of the most popular books in the world of AI, including her most recent book called AI Engineering, which has been the most read book on the O'Reilly platform since its launch. She's also gotten to work with a lot of enterprises on their AI strategies, and so she gets to see what's actually happening on the ground inside a lot of different companies. In our conversation, Chip explains a lot of the basics, like what exactly does pre-training and post-training look like? What is RAG? What is reinforcement learning? What is RLHF? We also get into everything she's learned about how to build great AI products, including what people think it takes and what it actually takes. We talk about the most common pitfalls that companies run into, where she's seeing the most productivity gains, and so much more. This episode is quite technical, more technical than most conversations I've had, and is meant for anyone looking for a more in-depth conversation about AI. If you enjoy this podcast, don't forget to subscribe and follow it in your favorite podcasting app or YouTube. And if you become an annual subscriber of my newsletter, you get a year free of 16 incredible products, including Devin, Lovable, Replit, Bolt, N8N, Linear, Superhuman, Descript, Whisperflow, Gamma, Perplexity, Warp, Granola, Magic Patterns, Recast, JPRD, and Mobbin. Head on over to lennysnewsletter.com and click Product Pass. With that, I bring you Chip Huyen, after a short word from our sponsors. This episode is brought to you by Dscout. Design teams today are expected to move fast, but also to get it right. That's where Dscout comes in. Dscout is the all-in-one research platform built for modern product and design teams. Whether you're running usability tests, interviews, surveys, or in-the-wild fieldwork, Dscout makes it easy to connect with real users and get real insights fast. You can even test your Figma prototypes directly inside the platform. No juggling tools, no chasing ghost participants. And with the industry's most trusted panel, plus AI-powered analysis, your team gets clarity and confidence to build better without slowing down. So if you're ready to streamline your research, speed up decisions, and design with impact, head to dscout.com to learn more. That's dscout.com. The answers you need to move confidently. Did you know that I have a whole team that helps me with my podcast and with my newsletter? I want everyone on that team to be super happy and thrive in their roles. JustWorks knows that your employees are more than just your employees. They're your people. My team is spread out across Colorado, Australia, Nepal, West Africa, and San Francisco. My life would be so incredibly complicated to hire people internationally, to pay people on time and in their local currencies, and to answer their HR questions 24/7. But with JustWorks, it's super easy. Whether you're setting up your own automated payroll, offering premium benefits, or hiring internationally, JustWorks offers simple software and 24/7 human support from small business experts for you and your people. They do your human resources right so that you can do right by your people. JustWorks, for your people. Chip, thank you so much for being here and welcome to the podcast.
Hi, Lenny. I've been a big fan of the podcast for a while, so I'm really excited to be here. Thank you for having me.
I want to start with this table/chart that you shared on LinkedIn a while ago that went super viral. And I think it went super viral because it hit a nerve with a lot of people. And let me just read this, and we'll show this on YouTube for people that are watching. So it's this very simple table you shared of what people think will improve AI apps and what actually improves AI apps. what people think will improve AI apps, staying up to date with the latest AI news, adopting the newest agentic framework, agonizing over what vector databases to use, constantly evaluating what model is smarter, fine-tuning a model. And then you have what actually improves AI apps, talking to users, building more reliable platforms, preparing better data, optimizing end-to-end workflows, writing better prompts. Why do you think this hit such a nerve with people? And just what, if you had to boil it down, what do you think people are missing about building successful AI apps?
One question that get asked a lot and a lot is that, how do we keep up to date with the latest AI news? And I'm like, why? Why do you need to keep up to date with the latest AI news? I know it's not very counterintuitive, but there's so much news out there. A lot of people also ask me questions like, how do I choose between two different technologies? Like maybe like recently like MCP versus like agent to agent, right? Like protocol, and it was like which one is better, or like this or that. And I think it's a silly question you should ask them is like, first, like if how much of the improvement could you get like from like optimal solutions versus non-optimal solutions, right? And sometimes they were like, actually, it's not much, right? And I was like, okay, if it's not much improvement, then why do you want to spend so much time debating something that doesn't make a much difference to your performance? And another question they ask is like, if you adopt a new technology, like how hard it could be to switch that out to another. And sometimes they were like, I think it could be like a lot of work switching it out. And I was just like, let's say here's a new technology. It hasn't been tested by a lot of people. And if you adopt it, you would be like stuck with it forever. Like, do you actually want to adopt it? Right. And maybe you want to think twice about like overcommit to like new technologies that hasn't been battle tested.
I love your just broader advice is just simple, like to build successful apps, talk to users, build better data, write better prompts, optimize the user experience. Versus just like, what is the latest and greatest? What's the best model to use right now? What's happening in AI? Let me follow this thread of this idea of fine tuning and basically post training. There's all these terms that people hear in AI, and I think this is going to be a really good opportunity for people to learn what we're actually talking about. Since you actually do these things, you build these things, you work with companies doing these things, and there's a few terms I want to sprinkle in through the conversation. But let's start with this one. What's the simplest way for someone to understand what is this difference between pre-training and post-training, and then just how fine-tuning fits into that, just what fine-tuning actually is?
Disclaimer, I don't have like full visibility into like on what like this big secretive like frontier labs are doing. But right from what I heard, right? So I think it's like one is like supervised fine tuning when you have demonstration data, and you have like a bunch of like experts like, okay, here's a prompt, right? And here is what the answer should be like. And like you just train it like on like to like simulate like emulate what the human expert could be like. And that's also like what a lot of people with like the open source models are doing, as they do it by distillation. So instead of having human experts to like write really good sounding great answers to like prompts, they get like very popular famous good models to like generate a response to it, and like getting this trained smaller model to emulate. So sometimes you see people just like, so that's because like I really appreciate open source community, by the way. But like going from like being able to train a models that can emulate a existing good model is very different from like being able to train a good models that like can outperform existing good models. So it's a big step there. So like we have my supervised fine tuning, and another thing that's like very big. I'm not sure you have guests talking about it already, but like reinforcement learning is like everywhere.
Let's pause on that because I would definitely want to spend time on that, and that's such a cool topic that's merging more and more in my conversations. But just to even summarize the things you just shared, which I think is really, really important stuff. So the idea here is a model, essentially this algorithm piece of code that someone writes, and say the frontier models are feeding it just like the entire internet of content, and basically it's trying to test itself on predicting across all that data the next word. Essentially, token is is the correct way of thinking about it, but a simpler way to think about it is like the next word in text. And as it gets it wrong, it adjusts these things called weights. Essentially, just like, is that a simple way to think about it? Even though that's just like very surface level.
So I think of language modeling as a way of encoding statistical information about a language, right? So let's say that we both speak English, so we kind of get a sense of like what is more statistically likely. Like if I say my favorite color is, then you would say, okay, that should be another color. Like the word blue would be much more likely to appear than the word like table. right? Because statistically, blue is more likely to come up to my favorite color is. So it's just like get this it's a way of encoding statistical information. So like when language modeling, when you train a large amount of data, like it see a lot of languages, a lot of domains, so it can tell like, okay, you guys say this sentence, then it user do the prompts and it would come like with the next most likely token. So by the way, it's not a new idea. Actually, so this idea comes very, very old, like from the 1951 papers. The like English entropy. I think it's like Claude Shannon. It's a great paper. And I think there's a story I really like. Is from. Did you read Sherlock Holmes, by the way?
Yeah, I read a few Sherlock Holmes books. Yeah.
Yeah, so this is a story of like when Sherlock Holmes was using this statistical information to like have solved a case. So he was getting so this is this story. There is somebody left a message with a lot of like stick figures. So Sherlock Holmes was like, okay, he knows that in English the most common letter is E. Then the most common stick figure must be E, right? And then he start like that. He was really solve the code. So I think that's language. So in a way, it's like simple language modeling, right? But instead of like at a word level, he does it at like character level. And token is something in between, right? A token is not quite a word, but it's bigger than a character. So let's say we say token because it helps us like help us reduce vocabulary, because with character is like smallest amount of like vocabulary right now. So the alphabet has like 26 character, but words can have like millions and millions, right? Whereas tokens you can like be able to like get like the sweet spot between the two. So let's say that we have like the new word like how to say like podcasting, right? Let's say it's a new word, but it can divide in a podcast and ing. So people understand, okay, podcast, we know the meaning, we know that ing is like a verb, like gerund, whatever it is. So we know the word like podcasting. So that's why the token comes in. But yeah, that's like the pre-training is basically like encoding statistical informations of language to have you predict what is most likely. I think that most likely is a more simple way of doing it. Because it's more like building a distribution of like, okay, so like the next token could be like more like 90% of the channel, it could be like a color, 10% of the time could be like something else, right? So it based on distribution, so language could like pick, like depending on your sampling strategy. Like, do you want it to always pick the most likely token, or do you want it to pick something more creative? So I think my sampling strategy, I think, is something extremely important. It can have you boost up performance in a huge way, and very, very underrated.
Okay, awesome. So essentially, a model is just code with this whole set of weights, essentially the statistical model that has learned to predict what comes next after certain words and phrases.
Yeah.
And then post-training and fine-tuning specifically is doing that same thing. So pre-training, you get like GPT-5. Fine-tuning is someone taking GPT-5 and doing the same sort of thing, adjusting these weights a little bit for specific use cases on data that they find is necessary to do their very specific use case. Is that a simple way to think about it?
Yeah, I think of like weights as like functions, right? So let's say just like you have maybe it has the functions of like maybe Lenny's height is maybe like 1x, like 1x plus something, or like 2x, like 1 and plus something is a weight, right? So you change it until you fit the correct data, which is like my height and your height, right? So you can take it as a weight is just like a weight, like they function. So you like adjust the weights so they can fit the data, which is the training data.
Awesome. Okay. So we're talking about pre-training, post-training, fine-tuning. Is there anything else here that's important to share about just like what this is exactly, what people need to understand about these parts of training?
So the vast majority of time, we don't touch on like pre-training model. Like as users, we don't use
It's already
it
done
at
for
all.
us.
Like, yeah. So I think actually it's pretty fun like process. Like when my friends training models, I try to play with their pre-training model, and they're horrendous. They're like saying things that's like, it was like, oh my gosh, it's like, yeah, it's crazy. So it's very interesting to look at like how much of like post training can change the model behavior. Yeah, and I think that's where like a lot of time as that a lot of people are spending energy on nowadays in frontier lab is on like post training, because pre-training I think so pre-training have been used to like increase the general capacity of a model, capabilities of a model, and it depends on like you need a lot of data and like model size like to increase to increase the model capabilities. And at some point, we are actually like have kind of max out on the internet data, right? And people like text data very max out. I think a lot of people are doing like with other data like audios and videos, and like everyone's trying to think of like what is the new source of data. But if we're like post training, but like with of course of like it's just more of like everyone kind of have very similar pre-training data. It's like post training is where they make a big difference nowadays.
This is a good segue to, you talked about supervised learning versus unsupervised learning. I love, we're getting into this, by the way. This is super interesting. So you talked about labeled data. Basically, supervised learning is AI learning on data that somebody has already labeled and told it, here's correct versus incorrect. For example, this is spam versus not spam. This is a good short story. This is not a good short story. We've had the CEOs of a lot of these companies that do this for labs, Mercor and Scale, Handshake, there's Micro, there's a few others. So is that essentially what these companies are doing for labs, giving them labeled data, high quality data to train on?
It is in a way, but I think it's more like a part of a big equations. So there are a lot more different components than that. So that's why I was talking about reinforcement learning. I'm not sure if your CEOs that you interview bring up like that term. So the idea is that you want people to like, so like let's say you have a model, give the model like a prompt, right, and it produce an output, right. You want to reinforce or encourage the model to produce an output that is better, right? So like that, how like now it comes to like how do we know that the answer is good or bad, right? So usually people realize on like signals. So one way to get like a response good or bad is like human feedback, right? We have two responses. You can okay, this one's better than the other, and we do that is because like as humans, we tend to. It's very hard to give like concrete score, but it's easier to do comparisons, right? Like if you ask me, okay, give this song a score. I'm not a musician, like, and don't know like how hard it is. Like, it's like, yeah, I don't know, like what, like out of 10, I go to 6, you know. And like if you ask me again a month from now and I completely forgot, it's like, okay, maybe now 7 or like 4, I don't know. But then if you ask me, okay, here are 2 songs, and which one could you prefer to play for the birthday party? I was like, okay, I can pretty prefer this song. So like comparison is a lot easier. So yeah, so you have you have human feedback, and then you use this human feedback to train a reward model. So you like tell like which like so, and then this reward model help you like okay, the model produce this response. Is the reward model can score. Is this good or bad? And you try to bias toward like producing better model, the better responses. Another way is like you can instead of using a human, you can use like AI. Right, like look at the response, say yes or good or bad, right? Or another thing is that people are very big on nowadays, like verifiable rewards, which is like kind of natural. So basically, they give it a math problems and then math solutions. Like is a model output a solution, is you know that okay, it's a expected response should be in a 482, and it doesn't provide 482, then it's wrong, right? And it's not a good response. So yeah, so like a lot of time people like using this human labor, like human labor to like produce like math, like how to say expert questions and like the expected answers, and in the ways that like design systems that like verifiable so that the models can be trained on. Yeah.
Okay, I'm really glad you went there. This is essentially RLHF, reinforcement learning with human feedback, which is exactly what I wanted to also talk about, right?
Yeah, so I think it's like it's general. It's like it's a way of learning. It's like training is conditional learning, and whether it learned from human feedback or like AI feedback or like verifiable rewards. I think they say it's just different way of like collecting signals. Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, that's we had the CEO of Anthropic on the podcast, and he talked about their version of RLHF, which is AI-driven reinforcement learning. I love the way he phrased it, where you want to help the model, you want to reinforce correct behavior and correct answers, and this is the method to do it. Whether it's say an engineer seeing an output from a model, being like, no, here's how I would code it differently, and then it's training a different model that the original model works with to tell it, am I correct or not correct? Is that right?
Yeah,
Roughly?
I
Okay.
think that's a way of looking into it, and I think that space is so exciting nowadays because there's so many like domain expert tasks that the model like that model developers want model to do well on, right? Let's say you're like accountant, right? Like maybe you want to use a model to have accounting tasks, so I need a lot of like accounting data, like examples from my accountants. So you need to hire a lot of them to like do it. Or if you want to physics problems, or you want to do I don't know, like legal questions and stuff, or like engineering questions, or like somebody was telling me they want to do like using like coding to solve scientific problems and not just like coding to build product, which is another different whole realm of things. And I also like using very specific toolings like I'm not sure like what apps you use, but maybe like forwarding app or like QuickBooks or like Google Excel. Like they are very specific, like tool specific expertise that you want the model to learn. So like they need a lot of like humans expert in this area to like create data to train them. And it's a massive thing. It's like people, because everyone wants a lot of data and like wants labs have like unlimited budget. But whether I think there's also like a little bit of low key interesting economics. So I'm not sure you've talked to like the guests about. I thought it's very interesting to think about because it's very lopsided, right? Because like they're only like a very small numbers of frontier labs, right? And they want a lot of data. And there's like a massive amount of like startups or companies that providing data. So like you can see these companies like this startup like doing data labeling, like they have like maybe they have like massive AR. But you ask them like, okay, so how many customers you have? And they could be like a very small numbers. I'm not sure. You I saw you smiling.
Yeah, we
So
chat about that.
yeah, so I'm like a bit like making me uneasy, right? I have a, like a company's growing like crazy, but it's like heavily dependent on like 2 or 3 companies. And at the same time, like if I was this company, Frontier Labs, what could be the right economical things for me to do? Right now, I want a lot of startups. I want to have a lot of providers so I can pick and choose. And then these providers can also like to compete each other to lower the price, and it's so dependent on me. It will sell to me regardless. So I feel like this economics, the whole economics is very interesting to me, and I'm curious to see how it plays out.
What I'm hearing is you're bearish on the future of these data labeling companies because, as you said, they don't have a lot of leverage over pricing because they have so few customers, and there's so many people getting into the space. So basically, even though they're some of the fastest growing companies in the world, you're feeling like there's a challenge up ahead.
I'm not sure if I'm bearish on it. I think I'm curious because I think things have had a way of work out in ways that I don't expect. So I think that maybe these companies, they have a lot of data. Maybe they wouldn't be able to use that to like have some insights that helps them like stay ahead of the curve. So I don't know.
A very fair answer. Okay, while we're on this topic, I want to chat about evals, which is a very recurring topic in this podcast. This is the other piece of data content these companies share that AI labs really need. Can you just talk about what an eval is, the simplest way to understand it, and then how this helps models get smarter?
So I think that people approach eval, I think they're like 2 very different problems. One is a app builder, right? And like, can I say have an app that do like maybe a chatbot? Very simple. I know it's the first thing that came to my mind. And I want you to know if chatbot is good or bad, right? So it needs to come up way with like evaluate the chatbot. Another thing is I think of this as a task specific eval design. So let's say I'm a model developer and I want to make my model better at code writing, right? And I was like, okay, but how do I even measure code writing, right? So I even need someone to like, okay, understand code writing and think about like what makes good story, or like what makes a story good, and then design the whole data set and then criteria to evaluate code writing. So I think there's that. I think it's like more like eval design that is very interesting. Come up with criteria, come up with guideline how to do it, and then also like train people like how to do it effectively. So I guess in a way, I think eval is really really fun because it's extremely creative. I was looking at like different evals people built, and was like, wow, like it's just not dry at all. It's just like super fun.
We had a whole podcast on evals with Hamel and Shreya, uh, and that's exactly what they talked about. It's actually really fun to create evals for companies, especially. So let's still dig into that one a little bit more. There's this kind of debate online that I don't know how big of a deal this debate is, but it feels like people uh, spend a lot of time thinking about this idea of, do we need evals for AI products? Some of the best companies say they don't really do evals. They just go on vibes. They're just like, is this working well? Can I feel it or not? What's your take on just the importance of building evals and the skill of evals for AI apps, not the model companies?
You don't have to be like absolutely perfect at things to win. You just need to be like good enough and being consistent about it. Okay, this is not a philosophy I follow, But like I have worked with enough companies to see that play out. So when I say like why company don't need eval, right? Let's say you are like an executive, right? And you want to like have a new use case. So here's a use case you started out, we built, and it's like it works well, right? The customers are somewhat happy. You don't have the exact metric for it, but like so the traffic keeps increasing, like people seem happy, people keep buying stuff, right? And now here's an engineer coming like, okay, we need eval for it. And so and it's like, it was like, okay, how much effort do we need to put into eval? And they were like, okay, maybe like two engineers as much, and they could maybe would improve that. And was like, okay, so how much expected gain can I get from it? And the engineer would be like, oh, maybe you can improve it from like 80% to like 82%, 85%, right? And I was like, okay, but if we take like that two engineers and be able to launch a new feature, then you could give me like so much more like improvement, right? So I think it's like one of them is like eval. Sometimes people think of eval is like, okay, this is good enough, just don't touch it. Like if you do spend a lot of energy on eval, I would like only incremental improvement where it spends the energy on like another use case. And maybe it's get it good enough that you can just vibe check it, right? So I do think it's like maybe it's like that's a debate is about. I do think that's like a lot of time people just like get things to the place where it's like, okay, good enough, people run. But of course, it's like there's a lot of risk associated with it because if you don't have a clear metric, you have a good visibility to how the application and the model is performing. It might do something very dumb, or it can cause you like I know something like crazy can happen. So yeah, so I do think eval is very very important if you operate at scale, and where like failures can have like catastrophic consequences, then you do need to be very tyrannical about like what you put in front of the users, understand different failure modes, like what could go wrong. And also maybe in a space when that like it's a feature as a the product is as a competitive advantage, right? You want to be the best at it. So you want to have like a very strong understanding of like where you are and like where you are with the competitors. But it's just something that's like more like a low key, okay, it's like something that's like, okay, that's not the core, but like it helps with the users. Then maybe you don't need to be so obsessed or like theoretical about it. It's like, okay, that's good enough for now. And if it fails, then it fails. Like, okay, I know it's like it's so terrifying, but like yeah, I think it's all about like the question of like return on investment. I'm a big fan of eval. I love reading eval. And that says like I understand why some people would choose to not focus on eval right away and choose like bringing on new functionalities instead.
Awesome. That is a really pragmatic answer. What I'm hearing is evals are great, very important, especially if you're operating at scale, but pick your battles. You don't need to write evals for every little feature. Something that Hamel and Shreya shared is that people need just like, I don't know, 5 or 7 evals for the most important elements of their product. Is that what you see, or do you see a lot more in production that people build and need?
I don't think of like just a fixed number on like the evals. Like what was a goal eval, right? The goal eval is to guide the product development. So like you see eval, because I think I'm a big fan of eval is that it helps you uncover opportunities where the products are doing well. So I sometimes I've seen it very obvious. Okay, so it's like, okay, when you look at the eval, we realize it's like, okay, it performed really poorly on this like specific segment of users. And then we look into it, it's like, okay, what's wrong with it? And it turns out it's like we just like don't have a good messaging to it. So like maybe we should like just focus on the things that we're doing poorly and can improve significantly. Yeah, so I kind of like the number of eval is really depends. Like we have seen product with like hundreds of different metrics,
Oh,
right?
wow.
Like people are like going crazy. This is because like that product is like general, right? You have different things. Have like one eval for like I don't know, like verbosity. Have like one eval for like user sensitive data. And like another is like is for length, but like has a number of like okay, let's just pick a good example, concrete example, like deep research. So you have the application, you have like build a model to like do deep research for you, right? Like okay, like have a prompt, like me say, okay, do me a comprehensive research on all Lenny's podcast and help me like sort of like propose like show me report on what kind of topics he's interested in, what kind of videos could get the most views, or like what topics that he's missing on that he should be covering, right? Like have that kind of like prompt. Then how do you evaluate the result, right? I don't think there's like one like metrics that would help. Maybe it's just like maybe you have like 100. I think somebody has a benchmark and is to get like 100 experts, like write a bunch of prompts and they go through like on the answers on AI and I do it. And it's like it's extremely costly and slow. right? But if you might have something else, for example, like one way I was thinking about it, I was talking to a friend about it, and one way is just like how you produce the result of the summary, right? At first, you need to be able to do like gather informations, and to gather informations, you need to do a lot of search queries. You like grab the search results, and then from the search results, you like aggregate, and then maybe say, okay, I'm still missing out on this. You have to do another route, and like another route, and at the end have the summary. So every step of the way, you need evaluations, right? You don't need to the end to end. So maybe if it was a search query, you might first think about like, okay, now I write 5 search queries. And I look into like how good are these search queries? Like, are they like similar to each other? Because in the 5 search queries that are very similar, like, okay, Lenny podcast, Lenny podcast last month, Lenny podcast like 2 months ago, right? It's not very, very exciting. But like if the quality of the podcast, like the keywords are like more diverse, right? And then look at the results of the search query. And let's say you enter the search query like Lenny podcast data labeling. And then they come up with like 10 pages, 10 results. And then you come up with like, oh, Lenny podcast on, Frontier Labs, and you have like 10 results. And I look at a different web page, like how much of them overlapping. Like are we doing both like the breadth, like getting a lot of page, but also like do we have depth, and also like have relevance, because we come up with a search queries that are completely irrelevant to the original prompt. So I feel like every aspect of it would need a way of evaluating, right? So I don't think it's just like how many eval should I get, but like how many eval do I need to get a good coverage, a high confidence in my application's performance, and also to help me understand like where it is not performing well, so that I can fix it.
Awesome. And I'm hearing also just especially for the very core use case, like the most common path people take in your product is where you want to focus.
Yeah. So yeah.
Okay. There's one more term I want to cover, and I want to go in a somewhat different direction. RAG. People see this term a lot, RAG. What does it mean?
So RAG stands for Retrieval Augmented Generations. It's also not a specific to generative AI. So the idea is just like for a lot of questions, we need context to answer. So I think it came I think it's from the paper 2017. So someone was like, so they realized it's like for a bunch of like benchmark, when the question answering benchmarks, they realize it's like, okay, if we give the model informations about the questions, then the answer can be much, much better. So what they do is that they try to retrieve information from Wikipedia. So for question or topics, it's like retrieve that and then put into the context and like answer it does much better. So I feel like it sounds like a no-brainer, right? I mean, like obviously. So I think that's what RAG as a simplest sense is just like providing the model with a relevant context so that it can answer the questions. And that's where like things get like really more interesting, because traditionally when it started out, RAG is mostly like text. So we talk about like a lot of way of like how to prepare data so that the model can retrieve effectively. Let's say that's like not everything is a Wikipedia page, right? Like Wikipedia page is pretty contained, and like that, okay, everything about it is about a topic. But a lot of time you have documents that are extremely long, right? And like they have a weird way of like structures of documents. Let's say that you have documents about Lenny podcast, right? And in the future, in the beginning of documents, like from now on, podcast wouldn't refer to Lenny's podcast, right? So let's say somebody in the future is like, okay, tell me about Lenny, right? Lenny's work. And because the rest of the document does not have the term Lenny, you just don't know, you might not read through it. And the document is long enough that it's chunked into a different part. So like the second part doesn't have the word Lenny, so you cannot read through it. So you have to find a way to process data so that makes sure it's like it can retrieve the information that's relevant to the query, even though it might not immediately like obvious that is related. So people come up with like only thing of I think like contextual retrieval, giving a chunk of the data, the relevant like maybe in a summary metadata so that it knows. Or like some people use it like as a hypothetical questions. It's very interesting. Like for a given this chunk of like documents, I must generate a bunch of questions that the chunks can help answer. So that when they have a query, it's like, okay, does it match any of the like hypothetical questions? So it can fetch it. So it's a very interesting approach. Okay, so maybe before I go to the next thing, I just want to say that's like data preparations for RAG is extremely important. And I would say that's like in a lot of the companies that I have seen, that's like the biggest performance in their rack solutions coming from like better data preparations, not agonizing over like what better databases to use. Because better database, of course, it's very important to care about like things like latency or like if you have like very specific access patterns like read heavy or write heavy. Of course, it's like it matters. But in terms of like pure quality answers, right? I think the data preparation is just like hands out.
When you say data preparation, what's an example to make that real and concrete for us to understand?
So like one way is just like just mentioned as in like you have like chunks of data. So we can think about like how big of each chunk should be, right? Because if it's like so the thing about like if the context you want to maximize, maybe you can it's a very simple example, right? Now you want to retrieve like 1,000 words, right? So if each chunk of data is too long, then so if a data chunk is long, then it's more likely to contain more relevant metadata, so you can retrieve more. But if it's too long, like then you have 1,000 words, and so chunk is like 1,000 words, you can reach one chunk, so it's not very useful. But if it's too short, then you can retrieve more relevant information. Like so it can retrieve a wider range of like documents and chunks. But at the same time, each chunk is too small to contain relevant information. So we have like very nice like chunk design, like how big a chunk should be. You add like contextual information like summary, metadata, hypothetical questions. Somebody was telling me just like a very big performance they got is that from rewriting their data in the question answering format. So like instead of having like so they have a podcast, right? Instead of just chunking the podcast, you just like rewrite it into like here's a question, here's answers, like and produce a lot of them. You can use AI for that as well. So that's one example of data processing. A lot of example I see is like for people helping like using AI to help with like specific tool use and documentations, right? And we write documentation usually a lot of documentation today is written for human reading, and AI reading is different because humans we have like common sense and we kind of know what it is. So one things that are like human experts they have the context that AI doesn't quite have. So somebody told me is that like what's a big change they have is like let's say that you have a function a documentation for this maybe this library, and this library says okay the output of this one is like maybe talking for like I know some crazy term maybe like some temperature or something under graph. It should be like 1, 0 or -1. And as a human expert, maybe you understand the scale, like what one in the scale mean. But like for AI, just really doesn't understand what it means. So actually have like another annotation layer for AI. It's like, okay, good temperatures equal 1 means like that. It's not like it's an absolute temperature. It's more like associated with the scale over there. So like just having that all this data processing to make it easier for AI to retrieve the relevant information to answer the questions.
This episode is brought to you by Persona, the verified identity platform helping organizations onboard users, fight fraud, and build trust. We talk a lot on this podcast about the amazing advances in AI, but this can be a double-edged sword. For every wow moment, there are fraudsters using the same tech to wreak havoc, laundering money, taking over employee identities, and impersonating businesses. Persona helps combat these threats with automated user, business, and employee verification. Whether you're looking to catch candidate fraud, meet age restrictions, or keep your platform safe, Persona helps you verify users in a way that's tailored to your specific needs. Best of all, Persona makes it easy to know who you're dealing with without adding friction for good users. This is why leading platforms like Etsy, LinkedIn, Square, and Lyft trust Persona to secure their platform. Persona is also offering my listeners 500 free services per month for 1 full year. Just head to withpersona.com/Lenny to get started. That's withpersona.com/Lenny. Thanks again to Persona for sponsoring this episode. Awesome. Okay. So you've talked a bit about how you work with companies on these sorts of things, on their AI strategies, on their AI products, how they build, which tools they build, all these things. I want to spend a little time here because a lot of companies are building AI products. A lot of companies are not having a good time building AI products. Let me ask a few questions along these lines of what you've learned working with companies that are doing this well. One is just, I guess, in terms of AI tool adoption and adoption in general within companies, there's all this talk recently of just like all this AI hype. The data is actually showing most companies try it, doesn't do a lot, they stop. And so there's all this just like, maybe this isn't going anywhere. So in terms of just adoption of tools in AI within companies, what are you seeing there?
For Gen AI in company, I think there are 2 types of Gen AI toolings that have been I have seen. Like one is to like internal productivity. right? Like have coding tools, Slack chatbot, internal knowledge. Like a lot of big enterprises have some kind like a wrapper around like models, so but like with access to, like maybe some different kind of rack solution. I think we talk about it a kind of like text-based rack. I haven't talked about like agentic rack or like haven't so like multimodal rack yet, but it's like yes, it's a whole very exciting area around that. Yeah, so like basically to allow the employee to like access internal document. Somebody asked like, okay, I'm having a baby. What could be the maternal or paternal policy, right? Or like, am I having these operations? Could the health benefit like cover that? Or like, I want to like interview. Or I want to like refer my friend. What could be the process for that? So a lot of this like having internal chatbot to help with internal operations. Another category is more like customer facing. Or like partner facing. So product customer support chatbot is a big one. If a hotel chain, you might have like a booking chatbot, which is like somehow massive, like a lot of booking chatbot, because I guess it's I do have this theory of like a lot of applications companies pursue because they can measure the concrete outcome. And I feel like booking or like sales chatbot is very clear, right? Like what's a conversion rate right now with a chatbot with human operators, and what could be conversion rate with a chatbot. And it's somehow I think it's like very clear outcomes, and companies are easier to buy into these solutions. So a lot of companies have that like customer facing chatbot. So that is another category of tool. And I think that for customers or external facing tools, because people are driven to choose applications with clear outcomes. So the questions of adopting them is really based on like whether they see the outcome or not. Of course, it's not perfect because sometimes the outcome can be bad, not because the idea or like the application's idea itself is bad. It's just because the I don't know the process of building it is like not that great. So it's tricky. For the internal adoptions of like tooling, so internal productivity, that's where it gets tricky. I would say like a lot of companies, what they think of AI strategy, like I think of AI strategies have like usually have like two key aspects, right? It's like use cases, and the second is talent. You might have like great data for great use cases, but you don't have talents and you cannot do it. So a lot of time in the beginning with Gen AI, and it's still, and sometimes I'm really admire a lot of companies for that. Is just like executives like, okay, we need our employees to be very Gen AI aware, like very AI literate, right? So what they do is just like start like maybe like adopting a bunch of tools for the team to use. They have a lot of upscaling workshops, like they encourage learning. And I think it's like a really, really good thing. And it's also like willing to spend a lot of money into like adopting like giving people like ChatGPT subscriptions, Cursor subscriptions, Cloud Code subscriptions. So like to get the employees to like to be more AI literate. And that's the thing is, it's like a lot of the executive come to me and say, okay, we spend a ton of money on this tooling, but then we don't see, because you can see the usage. It was like, but people don't seem to use them as much. And what is the issue? So I think that is tricky. Yeah.
What do you think is the issue? Is it just they're like, they don't know how to use them? Like, what do you think is the gap here? Do you think we'll get to a place of just like, wow, work is completely different because of AI for a lot of companies?
The main thing is like it's really hard to measure productivity again. So I talked to a lot of people and they was like, first of all, on example is coding, right? A lot of companies now using coding agents or like coding AI assisted coding. And I was like, do you think that like it helps with your productivity? And a lot of times the questions are very hand wavy. Just like they were like, okay, I feel like it's been better, right? And I said, okay, because we have more PRs, we see more code, and the immediate correction. Okay, but of course, code number of live code is not a good metric for that, right? So it's really really tricky, and it's something funny. So I do ask people to ask their managers, because I work with like usually VP level, so they have like multiple teams under them. So I ask them like, okay, do you ask the managers like, okay, would you rather have access? Would you rather have give everyone on the team like very expensive coding agent subscriptions, or you get an extra headcount, right? Let's say it's like maybe like and almost everyone could say the managers, could say headcount. But if you ask VP level or like someone who managed a lot of teams, they could say just like they could want AI assistant tools. And the reason is that people say like, okay, because as managers, right, because you are still growing, like you're not as a level when you manage hundreds of thousands of people. So for you, like having one HR headcount is like, is big. So you want that not for productivity reasons, but because you just want to have more people working for you. Whereas for executive, you care more about like the maybe we have more like business metrics that you care about. So you actually think about like what actually drive productivity metrics for you. So it's tricky. And I think that's like the question of like productivity is not. I'm not sure it's like fundamentally is the some people more productive, but it's just like we don't have a good way of measuring productivity improvement. Another thing is also very wily. And I think that people do tell me that they notice different buckets of employees, like different reactions to AI assisted tools. Like, for example, like, I keep going back to coding because it's big and it's like easier to like reasons about. So it says like I have different reports. Like one team would tell me that like one of the people tell me, okay, amongst all his engineers, he thinks it's like senior engineers would get the most output, like would be more productive because it's like, okay, so that person very interesting. So he actually divided his team to like 3 buckets, but he didn't tell them obviously. He was like, okay, here's more like currently like best performing, average performing, and lowest performing. And then there's a randomized trial. So like they give like half of each group like access to like cursor. And then it was noticed like over time, it was like, okay, something funny, like the group that get the biggest performance boost, like in his opinion, like who's very close in his team, like the biggest performance boost, like the senior engineer, like the highest performing. So the highest performing engineer get the biggest boost out of it. And then the second group is just like the average performing. So his opinion is like, okay, the highest performing engineers are also more proactive. They also know how to solve problems. So AI helps them solve problem better. Whereas the people who already have the lowest performing, they only don't care much about work, right? So like it's easier to just like go on autopilot, get it to like generate like bad code and just like do it. And or just don't know how to do it. As another company, however, they told me just like actually senior engineers are the one most resistant to like using AI as this tooling because they said it's like, okay, but AI, because they are more opinionated and they have very high standard. It was like, okay, but AI code, generated code just sucks. So just like very, very resistant in using this. So I don't know. I haven't quite be able to reconcile like very different reports on that yet.
This is so interesting. So just to make sure I'm hearing the story. So there's a company you work with that did a 3 bucket test with their engineering team where they created 3 sorts of groups: the highest performing engineers, mid performing engineers, lowest performing engineers, and gave some of them. So they gave some of them access to say cursor. Was it cursor or what did they give them access to? It was cursor.
I think back then it was cursor. Yeah.
Okay, cool. And so within,
I didn't work with them. This is more like a friend company.
okay, it's a friend's company. So did they give like half of the higher performing engineers cursor and half not, or how did they do the split?
Yeah,
there?
so like they give like half of the entire company, but like half for each bucket. Yeah. And then they
Whoa.
observe the difference in like productivity.
I see.
Yeah.
So how do they even do that? They're just like, okay, you get cursor, you don't get cursors. How do they do that? That's so interesting.
Yeah, I didn't get into the mechanics of it. But I was like at respect here for doing a randomized trial.
That
like,
is so
on
cool.
that. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, wow. How large was this engineering team? Was it like hundreds of people?
It's not that large. It's about like maybe 30 to like 40. Yeah.
30 to 40. Okay.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. So they found that the highest performing engineers had the most benefit from using AI tools. And then behind them was the middle tier engineers, and the worst performers were
Yeah.
the lowest performers. Okay.
Yeah. But it's also not the same everywhere. Like some companies,
right.
different.
Right. This other example you shared of just
Yeah.
senior engineers in this one example are most resistant to changing the way they work, which I get. I do feel like the most valuable people right now, other than ML researchers and AI researchers like yourself, are senior engineers, because it feels like junior engineers are just like, so much of this is now done by AI, but an engineer that knows what they're doing, that understands how things work at a large scale with AI tools, just basically like infinite junior engineers doing their bidding, feels like an extremely valuable and powerful asset.
Yeah, I definitely like really appreciate. As you see, companies like we appreciate engineers who are um, have a good understanding of the whole systems and be able to have good problem solving skill, like thinking holistically instead of like locally. When our company have seen the way they work, as I said, told me that they work completely different now, and like so they actually restructured engineering org so that like they get more senior engineers to be more in the peer review because they've like to get like sort of writing guidelines on like what is a good engineering practices, what is a process would be like, maybe like okay, so they write like a lot of like processes on how to work well, and then they have more junior engineers just like produce code and like submit PR, but senior engineer more in the reviewing case. So I think it might be prepare for the future. So another company actually told me something very similar. So they kind of preparing for the future when they only need a very small group of like very strong engineers to like create like processes and like reviewing code to get into production, but like get like AI or like junior engineers to like produce code. But then the question becomes is like, how does one become a very strong
Right.
senior
That's
engineer?
right. That's right.
Yeah, I feel
That's
like
the problem. Yeah.
yeah. So I don't know what's the process. I was thinking about like
No one's
I
thinking
mean we
about it.
don't
It's just, it's a
yeah.
problem. We won't have any more in 10, 20 years. There'll be no more engineers because no one's hiring junior engineers. Although I could make the case, junior engineers, people just getting into computer science right now are just native, AI native. And in
Yeah.
theory, you could argue they will become really good really fast if they're curious, aren't just, de- delegating learning and thinking to AI, but learning how to actually using it to learn how to code well and architect correctly. Like you could argue they will be the most successful engineers in the future.
I do think that what I mentioned is like loading to architect. I think I group that in like system thinking. I do think it's a very important skill because I think AI can help automate a lot of like disjointed skills, but like knowing how to like utilize the skills together to solve a problems is very is hard. So there's a webinar between Mira Sami, who was my one of my favorite professors. He was a chair of the curriculum at the CS department at Stanford. So he spent a lot of time thinking about CS educations, right? Like what should students learn nowadays in the era of like AI coding. And then the other person is like Andrew Ng, which is of course is like a legend in the AI space. And Neera Sami, Professor like Sami, said something very interesting. It's like he said like a lot of people think that CS is about coding, but it's not. Like coding is just a means to an end. Like CS is about system thinking, like using like coding to solve actual problem. And problem solving will never go away because like what like AI can automate more stuff, the problem just get bigger. But like the process of like, understanding what caused the issue and like how to like design step by step solution to it will always be there. So I think an example of like I actually have a lot of issues with like AI for like in the way of like is debugging. So I'm not sure you use a lot of AI for coding, but like something I have noticed and also seen from my friends, it's like AI is pretty good when you have very clear, well-defined tasks. Maybe write documentations, fix specific features, or like build an app from scratch, right? Like it doesn't have to interact with a large existing code base. But if it is something like a little bit more complicated, maybe it require interacting with a lot of components and stuff. It's usually like not that good. And for example, like I was using AI to like use to deploy an applications. And I was testing out a new hosting service I was not familiar with. It was like, okay, like usually they for me. So what the AI does give me is like confidence to try new tool. Like before what AI is like trying new tools, has written a lot of documentations for the beginning, but AI was like, okay, just try it out and learn. So I was testing out this new hosting service and it kept getting a bug that was like very annoying. And it was like, okay, I asked Cloud Codes like fix it. And it kept giving me like it kept changing the way, like maybe change the environment variable, fix the code, maybe like change from the function to this function, maybe change the language, maybe it doesn't process JavaScript well, I don't know, whatever. And so it didn't work. And it was like, okay, that's it. I'm just gonna read the documentation myself and see what's wrong. And it turns out it's like I'm on another tier. Like the feature I want is not available in this tier, right? So I feel like, okay, so the issue with Cloud Code is trying to focus on fixing things from a different component, whereas the issue is from a different component. So I think of like, okay, be understanding like how different components work together and where the source of the issue might come from. You need to get a holistic view of it. And it's made me think, it's like, okay, how do we teach AI, like system thinking, like that, right? I think I have all the human experts, like having like like very much people call it scaffold. Just like, okay, for this kind of problem, look into this, look into that, and then stuff. So I think is that could be one way. But that also made me think, is like, how do we teach humans like system thinking? Yeah. So I think it's very interesting skill. I do think it's very important.
That's exactly the same insight Brett Taylor shared on the podcast. He's the co-founder of Sierra. He created Google Maps. He was CEO of Salesforce, Quip, a few other things. And I asked him just like, should people learn to code? And his point is exactly what you said, which is taking computer science classes is not about learning Java and Python. It's learning how systems work and how code operates and how software works broadly, not just here's like a function to do a thing. One thing that I wanted to help people understand, you wrote this book called AI Engineering, which is essentially helping people understand this new genre of engineer. And you have this really simple way of thinking about the difference between an ML engineer and an AI engineer, which has a really good corollary to product managers now, of just like an AI product manager versus a non-AI product manager. The way you describe it and fill in what I'm missing is just ML engineers build models themselves. AI engineers use existing models to build products. Anything you want to add there?
One thing I really dislike about writing books is that you have to define like this, and I think it's like no definitions will be perfect because there always be like edge cases. But yeah, in general, I think it's like just like AI as a service, like models as a service, like when somebody build the models for you and the base model performance is pretty strong. So it's like it's enable people to just like, okay, now I want to integrate AI into my product. I don't need to learn what Korean design is, even though knowing that could really help. But yeah, it's like it makes the entry barrier really low for people who want to use AI to build product. And at the same time, AI capabilities are like so strong. It's like it's also like increased like the possibilities, like the type applications that AI can be used for. So I think like so like both entry barriers like super low and like the demand for like AI applications like a lot bigger. So I feel it's very, very exciting. It opens up like a whole new world of possibilities.
Yeah, it's like now you don't have the time. You don't even have to spend time building this AI brain. Now you can just use it to do stuff. Such an unlock. Okay, maybe just a final question. You get to see a lot of what's working, what's not working, where things are heading. I'm curious, just if you had to think about in the next 2 or 3 years, just where things are heading. What do you think? What do you think? How do you think building products will be different? How do you think companies working will be different if you had to think of maybe the biggest change we expect to see in the next few years in terms of how companies work?
I think in a lot of organizations, they don't move that fast, right? But at the same time, they also move faster than I expected. Because again, I think it's like bias. Like I don't work with dinosaur companies. I don't care. I think a lot of executives who come to me are like very forward looking. So maybe for me, I'm very biased towards like organizations is like move fast. So yeah. So I think one big change I see is just like in organizational structure. I think there's like a lot of value placed in like so before, right, we have like a lot of disjointed team. Like we have very clear like engineering team, product team. But then there's a question of like who should write eval, right? Like who should own the metrics? And it turns out it's like eval is not it's not a separate problem. It's a system problem, right? Because you need to look into different components, how they interact with each other. You need to see user behaviors because you need to know what users care about so that you can like write evals, like reflect what users care about. So all of that, like you can sort it from like you look into different component architectures, place guardrails and stuff. So it's just engineering, but understanding users is like what product, right? So because of like a lot of things, and eval is extremely important. So like that kind of brings product team and like engineering team, even like marketing team, like user acquisition, like very close to each other. So yeah, since in a way, some people are structuring so there's more communications between like previously very distinct functions. Another thing is just like also see as teams. Of course, like think about like what can be automated in the next few years and what cannot be automated. And I see that people already like shedding like actually it's a little bit like scary to think about it, but I also think it's like the teams the web told me, it's like, okay, this is between you and me, but we really like got rid of these functions, right? Like for a lot of things like previously outsourced, for example, like traditionally is a business outsourcing that's not core to them and like can be done with like not can be in a more systemized systematized. So with that, you can actually like use AI to like automate a lot of that. And also like the separation, people think more of like what is the value of like junior engineers or senior engineers, how to restructure engineering org for that. So I do definitely think that is one thing to success organization. People are just moving pieces around and like thinking about like use cases. Whether you need to like spin out new use cases and who would lead a new effort and like yeah, that is one big change. Another things in terms of like AI, I think this is I'm not sure how true this is. I guess I'm also like on the camp of like thinking that it has merit. Is a camp of like okay, base models we have probably like not quite max out, but want we are unlikely to see like really really strong, like crazily strong model. So like you remember like when we have like GPT, right? And GPT-2, which is a big step up, like an order of magnitude, like better than like GPT, and then GPT-3, which is like much bigger, and GPT-4 much bigger, and I of course I mean GPT-5, but like is GPT-5 like that scale of like much bigger, like a step jump compared to like the previous? I think it's a debatable, right? So I think that it's like we have reached a point where like the base model performance improvement is not gonna be like mind blowing, and it was in the last 3 years. So I think there's like a lot of like improvements we're gonna see in the post training phase, in the application building phase, and yeah, so I think that's where I feel I would see a lot of improvement there. I'm also very like interested in like multimodality. So we've seen a lot of text based, but I think there's a lot of audio, videos, use cases that is very exciting. And I think audio is not quite as solved as one thing because I do work with like with like a couple of like voice startups, and when you talk to think about voice, it's an entirely different beast. So let's say you have chatbot, right? We go from a text chatbot to voice chatbot. It's like the concerns are completely different because now with voice chatbot, right, we need to think about like latency because having multiple steps. First, like have like text, like voice to text, text to text, and text question into text answer, and then text to voice answer, right? So we have like multiple hops, and like latency becomes very important. And there's a question like, what does it make you sound natural? So for example, like people think like in AI and humans, so like when humans talk to each other, like if I say you try to interrupt me and say Chip, is that right? I would like pause and I try to hear you out, right? But sometimes I just even may just say some word, like acknowledge when I then I shouldn't stop. I just continue. So the question of like phone interruption, like whether it's like should I stop or not? Like it's a big in like what perceived as like natural conversations, and that's also regulations, right? Because like a lot of time people want to build AI chatbot, voice chatbots that sound like humans, try to like trick users into thinking they're talking to humans. But it's sort of like maybe potential regulations saying like, okay, you have to disclose to users when you talk if the if the bot is talking to is human or AI. So I think that's like there's a whole space. I think it's not quite as so as you think is it, but it's all not quite like an AI foundation model problem, right? Because like a human interruption detection is actually a classical machining problem. Like it's a different framing, but like you can build classifier for that. Or like the question of like latency is actually a massive engineering challenge, not an AI challenge. Of course, it can be an AI challenge because people are trying to build like voice to voice model. So instead of having to first like transcribe the voice from me into text and then get a model to generate text answer and get another model to like turn from text to speech, you can just like do voice to voice directly. So that is something we're working on, but it's like very hard. Yeah. So like even audio, I think of it as like the easier than video, right? Because video have like both image and voice. It's already like pretty hard. So I think there's a lot of challenges in that space.
That was an awesome list of things. Let me mirror them back real quick. So, what you're predicting in the next few years, things that will change in the way we work. And these actually resonate with so many conversations I've had on this podcast. So this is just kind of doubling down on where things are heading. One is the blurring of lines between different functions instead of just like design engineering. Everyone's going to be doing a lot of different things now. Two is just more of work being automated with agents and all these AI tools, and just in theory, productivity going up. Third is a shifting from pre-training models to post-training, fine-tuning, and things like that. Because to your point, models maybe are slowing down in how smart they're getting. Although I'll point folks to the chat with the co-founder of Anthropic. He made a really good point here. He's like, we're really bad at understanding what exponentials feel like when we're in the middle of that. And also models are being released more often. So the difference between them, we may not notice because they're just happening more often versus GPT-3 came out like a year, I don't know, after GPT-2. So maybe true, maybe not. And then the fourth point you made is this idea of multimodal, investing in multimodal experiences. I cannot wait for ChatGPT voice mode to get better at interruption, like exactly what you're saying. I'm just like talking to it, and then someone makes a little sound. And it's like, stop. Okay, and then you have to, and then it's like, and then it stops talking. It's so annoying.
I'm shocked that we don't have better voice assistant at home yet. I think I have been testing out a bunch. Honestly, I keep hoping, oh my god, that could be the one. And then I don't know how many of them I just like had to get away because they're not that good.
I think it's coming. I hear it's coming. Anthropic's working with someone that I don't know if it's launched or not yet.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Want to bring back to what you mentioned about like your guest, like from Anthropic, mentioned about the performance improvement. I think there's a big change. I think like this difference between a model-based capability. So I'm talking about like the pre-trained model, right, versus a perceived performance. So let's say it's just like I'm not sure you thought about like are you familiar with the term test time compute? Test
I
time
don't think
compute.
so.
Yeah.
Help us understand.
So the idea is it's like okay, like you have a fixed amount of compute, right? So you're gonna spend a lot of compute on pre-training or training the model, pre-training, and then have spend a lot of some compute on like fine tuning. And the ratio like pre-training to the post-training compute is like crazy, very different between different lab. And also like since then it has to spend compute on like generating inference. When I have a trained and fine-tuned model, now it want to like serve it to users. So I might type a questions or prompt and it like generate like do inference like and that requires a compute. And like if you have a discussion of like should I spend more compute on like pre-tuning or fine-tuning or inference, right? Because like inference and people found out as like test time compute. So like spending more compute on inference is like called like test time like compute like as a strategy of like just allocating more resources, compute resource to generate inference when actually bring better performance. And how does that do it? Like let's say you have a math questions, right? And maybe instead of just generating one answer, I can generate like 4 different answers and say, okay, whichever is the best according to some standard. Or like, okay, I have 4 answers and then maybe like 3 of them say 482 and one of them said like 20. You say, okay, 3 of them in agreement. So the answer should be 482. Right. So like just people shouldn't generate a bunch of it. Or another thing is like a lot of time like reasoning, thinking, you just like people should like generate more thinking tokens and spend more time thinking before showing the final answers. It's like require more compute, but also like give it more better performance. So I think it's like from the user perspective, right? Like when the model spend more time exploring different potential answers, thinking longer, it can give you much better final answers. But the base model itself does not change. Does it
Awesome.
make sense? Yes.
Yes,
Yeah.
that does absolutely.
Yeah.
That is a good corollary to Ben Mann's point.
Yeah.
Chip, we covered a lot of ground. I've gone through everything I was hoping to learn and more. Before we get to our very exciting lightning round, is there anything else that you wanted to share? Anything else you want to leave listeners with?
So I do work at a few companies that does these things of like they want employees to like come up with ideas. So there's a big debate on like what is a better way for a strategy, right? Should it be top down or like bottom up? Right? Should like executive come up with like 1 or 2 like killer use case and like everyone like allocate resource to that? Or like should you give engineers and PMs and like smart people like come up with ideas? And I think it's a mixture of both. So some companies it was like, okay, we hire a bunch of smart people like let's see like what they come up with and they organize like more like hackathons or like internal challenge to get people to build product. And one thing is that I noticed is like a lot of people just like don't know what you built, And it shocked me, like why I feel like we are in some kind of like an idea crisis, right? Now we have all this really cool tools to have you like do everything from scratch. Right? It can have you like design, it can have you like write code, it can have build websites. So in theory, we should see a lot more. But at the same time, people are like somehow stuck, like they don't know what to build. And I think it's like maybe it's a lot of had to do with like maybe like society expectations, because like we have gone into this phase of like specializations, like people like very highly specialized, and people are supposed to do like focus on one thing really well instead of having a big picture, and we don't have a big picture view. It's hard to come up with like ideas of what you build. So I know what like when I work with this company on this hackathon, like we do work out like how come up with a guideline, like how to come up with ideas. And usually what we think of is like, okay, like one tip is like go look from the last week, right? Like for a week, just like pay attention to what you do and what frustrates you. And when something frustrates you, think about like, is there anything we can do? Is there like, can it be done a different way so it's not frustrating? And you can talk like people can accept notebooks or teams, and I even see they come on frustrations. Maybe this is something you can think about, like just to build something around that. So yeah, so I feel like just like notice like how we work, thinking of like ways to like constantly ask questions like how can this be better, and then I just build something to like address the frustrations. I think it's a good way to just like learn and adopt AI.
I think people have felt exactly what you're describing every time they open up one of these vibe coding tools where you could just
Yeah.
describe anything you want. I'm like, I don't know, what do I want? And I love this very tactical piece of advice, just like what frustrates you, just pay attention to where you're frustrated. For example, I just built a very cool little vibe coded app. I was working on a newsletter post inside Google Docs, and I I pasted all these images into the Google Doc from screenshots and stuff. And then I forgot, oh yeah, you can't take images out of Google Docs. It's like this Hotel California experience where you can paste stuff into it. Very hard to get images back out. So I just went to all the vibe coded tools and just built an app that I can give you a Google Doc URL and it let me download all the images automatically. And it worked amazingly well. And I made it really cute. And I'll link to it in the show notes.
Oh, I would love to see that. I do. I'm very bullish on like using AI to just create like micro tools, like just something just like make your life a bit easier.
And 100%. I feel like that's one of the main ways people are using these tools, just like a little niche problem they have. With that, Chip, we've reached our very exciting lightning round. I've got 5 questions for you. Are you ready?
Yeah, always. I don't know. Depends on how hard the questions are.
They're very consistent across every guest. So I imagine you've heard them before. First question: what are 2 or 3 books that you find yourself recommending most to other people?
Oof, I'm really terrified of like book recommendations, because I feel like what books a person should read really depends on what they want and where they're in life and like where they want to get to. But I guess several books that I do think is have really changed the way I think and see the world. So one thing is the selfish gene. That's like to understand. It actually changed. It actually helped me with the question like whether I want to have kids or not. Because it's like understanding more of like yeah, a lot of our functions, the way we operate is functions of our genes, and genes want to do one thing was like to procreate. So yes, in a way, but also like the book also proposed another thing is like so everyone wants to live forever, right? And maybe it's not like consciously but subconsciously we do want that. And like there are 2 ways, like one is like via genes, like genes wants us to like want to continue forever, but also there are 2 ideas. I think there's something called a meme. It's like being able if you have some ideas out there and then it's like last for a long time, there's one way to like live on. I know it's like it's a little bit like abstract, but I thought it's very interesting. The other books I really really like is like from like the book from Singaporean previous I think he's also known as the father of Singapore. I don't know, like Lee Kuan Yew. I'm not sure like what's the title is, but like he was the one who led Singapore from. He changed Singapore from a third world country to a first world country within 25 years. And I have never seen any country leaders spend so much effort into like putting down his thought on like how to build a country like that. And as I talk a lot about like public policy, like how to like create policies that encourage people to do the right things that is good for the nations. And also talking about like foreign affairs, foreign policies, like the relation of like the country with other. So it's a really good book to think about. For me, it's like system thinking, but like it's a different kind of system, which a country, which a lot of us don't get a chance to like ever experiment in our life. So it's good to learn about that.
What was the name of that second book?
Uh, It's called like From Third to First World Culture. I think I have it somewhere here. Yeah,
There it
it's a
is.
very
Show
heavy
and
book.
tell. That's
Yeah.
that's awesome. I definitely want to read that. That's a really good tip. I've heard a lot about just the impact he's had, and I've seen all these videos on Twitter of just his really wise insights into how to build a thriving society. And
Yeah, can you
clearly it
believe
worked.
like how does he have time to write such a thick book? It's like insane.
That is Claude. Please summarize. I'm just joking. By the way, Selfish Gene, I also absolutely love that book. That is such a good choice. It's such an under the radar kind of book that really changed the way I see the world as well. So really good pick. Okay, next question. Do you have a favorite recent movie or TV show you really enjoyed?
So I watch a lot of movie and TV shows as research, because I working on my first novel and I recently sold it. So I'm interested in like what makes so it's a drama. It's not a science fiction or anything that like tech people usually read. So it's very like I know it's a very out of left field and like very so sometimes like watching TV to see like what kind of stories become popular, trying to understand the trope and stuff like that. So I'm not sure if the audience will like.
Well, what's one? What's one that taught you something about writing?
I think it's like Yamsi Palace. It's a Chinese TV show.
Cool. Okay. I haven't had that one on the podcast
Um,
before. Okay, cool.
yeah.
Next question. Do you have a life motto that you often think about, come back to when you're dealing with something hard, whether it's in work or in life?
This sounds very nihilist. I think to say it's like in the end nothing really matters. Usually I think of like in the grand scale of thing like in a billion years, nothing will like no one will ever be there. I think okay, some people argue with me about that. So I go to say like I so my theory is like in a billion years, like none of us will ever exist. So like whatever like messy things, like crazy things we do, or like how bad we do it. I mean, no one wouldn't be there to remember it. And I think in a way, it's like it sounds scary, but it's very liberating because it just allows me. Okay, let's just try things out, right? Like, why does it matter? And then there's a story of like recently. So I have some family member who passed away recently, and I was talking to my dad because I couldn't be home for that. I was asking my dad like, okay, is there anything I can do to make the person like something like comfort, so like anything you can get that person. And my dad was just like, what can he possibly want at this moment? Like it just made me feel like at the end of life, like there's nothing that can bring you like material can bring you joy. There's no like money, no product, nothing. And in a way, it's making me feel like, okay, what really do I really care about at the end of the day? So I guess it's like I think about it. It's like okay, maybe I fail it, maybe I don't get that contract, maybe those things like but in the end, at the end of life, like I don't think that actually really matters. So in a way, it's like it's kind of liberating.
I know you said it might be nihilistic. This is what Steve Jobs shared too in one of his most famous speeches. Just we will all die someday, so don't take things so seriously. And it is freeing, absolutely. It just makes you appreciate every moment, every day you have. Just like, yeah, let's just do something hard and scary. Okay, final question. You talked about how you're writing a novel. Most people in tech have never written something creative and fiction. What's just like one thing you learned in the process about how to write better stories, better fiction?
A lot of time when we read, we get tripped up by some small things. So I think like I want to do creative writing because I just want to go a better writer. And it tells us like maybe try my like a different audience could have me like become better at like anticipating what this different type of audience would want to hear and like what they care about. So it's a way for me to get a. So I think about writing or like even like any kind of like content creations, it's about like predicting the user's reactions, right?
The
Like you
next
do a
token.
podcast.
Just kidding.
Yeah. Yeah. So like you do a podcast, it's like, okay, what kind of things that the users could find engaging, right? And I find it's like a little bit like and a lot of companies like you have like launch a product, you have a narrative coming out. So okay, how do we position this product in a way that like users would want, right? So I feel like I have done technical writing for a while and I felt like I have had some experience like trying to predict what engineers would want to hear or like care about. But then I don't have an experience like this completely different type of audience. So that's what I want to do, like creative writing, writing a story. And that's why I was doing a lot of research on like watching, I mean, going research, I actually enjoyed a lot, like watching a lot of dramas. I just see like what people like. So one thing that I care about is just like, I think I learned is like, what like emotional journey. That's from my editor, right? So like when we write something like we care about like how users would feel, like across the story. Like we want something in the beginning, right? We want something just like We need to have a hook so that people continue reading. But we also don't want too much of like drama because we'll get like too tired, right? Like because like the emotion exhausted, like because it's like you're being like emotionally manipulated like a lot of time. So it can have like emotional journey. Maybe have like some climax or like something more chill, or like maybe like I also care about another thing that I didn't realize is like for me, for technical writing, you entirely focus on the content. Like the argument is very impersonal, right? Like it like for example, like people like ML compilers. Like doesn't matter if they like the person telling them about compiler or not, right? Because it's just like objective, like. But like for novel, people care about like character likability. So like in the first versions of my story, I make the characters like a little bit more like very logical, very rational, and just does everything just like very rationally. And then the feedback I got is I have a very good friend Reddit, and he's an amazing person, he's a great person, and he was like, Chip, I'll be honest with you, I hate that person. So it doesn't matter as a story, it's just like the person is so unlikable, just like he doesn't want to continue. So in the second version, I make that person the character more likable. Like how to make that character more likable is that you put in some vulnerability, like sometimes like okay, maybe this person like has setback because somehow we can relate to it. So in a lot of ways, like it's very interesting. It's like a lot of it is like yeah, a lot of it is about like understand the emotional bits, like how the users feel, not just about the story, but also about the characters.
That is so interesting. Wow. I learned a lot more there than I thought. That was awesome. Really good example. Chip, two final questions. Where can folks find you online if they want to reach out and maybe work with you, or maybe even just share the stuff that you offer if folks want to reach out? And then how can listeners be useful to you?
I'm on social media, LinkedIn, Twitter. I don't post a lot, but I keep telling myself that I should do more because I kind of like the conversation with readers. So I'm actually about to start a Substack. Um, so I have like a placeholder for Substack right now, and I'm thinking of doing it for more system thinking because I think it's a very interesting skill. And so like thinking of doing a YouTube channel on book reviews and basically books that help you think better. So I think it's the first book I'm gonna review is probably like this book because it's like my favorite book growing up, and I have been like keep on reading it. So yeah, so how can it be helpful? Like send me books that you like, books that help you have changed the way you think or change you the way you do anything. So I would appreciate it.
Amazing. I'm excited to read that book.
Mhm.
Uh, Chip, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much, Lenny, for having me.
Bye, everyone. Thank you so much for listening. If you found this valuable, you can subscribe to the show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or your favorite podcast app. Also, please consider giving us a rating or leaving a review, as that really helps other listeners find the podcast. You can find all past episodes or learn more about the show at lennyspodcast.com. See you in the next episode.